If someone had told me 3 years ago that I, Eleanor Vance, at 74 years old, would find myself adrift, I would have dismissed it with a hearty laugh. My life, spanning over 7 decades, had been a tapestry woven with diligence and a belief in the inherent goodness of people. It turns out, my understanding was incomplete. For most of my working life, I served as a meticulous architectural drafter for a prominent firm in Evergreen City, starting as a junior assistant, sketching blueprints and steadily ascending the ranks. It wasn't my childhood dream, but it provided a consistent income, a bedrock for my family. My late husband Arthur, God rest his soul, often praised my keen eye for detail and my prudent financial habits. Perhaps he exaggerated, but I did possess a knack for managing money. While colleagues splurged their earnings on flashy cars or lavish vacations, I meticulously saved. By the time I reached 50, I had amassed a substantial sum, which I began to strategically invest in real estate. My initial foray was a modest duplex for rent, followed by a second, then a third. I wouldn't claim to have become a magnate, but by retirement, I owned several properties that generated a reliable income, complemented by a healthy bank account. Arthur didn't live to witness this financial security. A sudden illness claimed him 5 years prior, leaving me alone in our quaint, albeit spacious, townhouse on the outskirts of Evergreen City. Beyond Arthur, my world revolved around my only child, Beatrice, a daughter born late in our lives and cherished deeply. Beatrice, I believed, grew into a kind and thoughtful young woman. She trained as a pediatric nurse, but after her children arrived, she transitioned to a front office manager position at a bustling private clinic. The hours were more accommodating, and the pay was quite respectable. Her husband, Owen, managed a small landscaping business. Nothing extravagant, a handful of employees, a couple of utility trucks with equipment, but it seemed to provide a comfortable living for them. Following Arthur's passing, my interactions with Beatrice and her family increased, primarily at my instigation. I'd call, suggest outings, and invite them for Sunday lunch. My grandchildren, Leo and Willow, now in their teenage years, were, to put it mildly, indifferent. During their visits, their gazes remained glued to their smartphone screens, a stark absence of the polite greetings or warm inquiries about my well-being. I tried not to take offense, attributing it to the modern generation's detachment. Beatrice, too, seemed distant after her father's death. I understood her grief. She adored Arthur. It felt as though my presence was a constant reminder of her loss, perhaps contributing to our diminishing contact. Or perhaps she simply had her own life, her own set of anxieties. Owen and I had never shared a close bond. He was a tall, lean man with an almost perpetually disgruntled expression. He consistently treated me with an exaggerated politeness that felt distinctly cold. I sensed his disinterest, but there was no overt conflict, and we maintained a neutral, if superficial, relationship, or so I believed. The past year, loneliness had become a heavy cloak. I found myself conversing with the empty rooms, preparing meals for one, and spending hours gazing out the window, yearning for a familiar face. Old friends, one by one, were either passing on or moving into assisted living facilities. At my age, the desire to forge new connections had waned. Increasingly, I entertained the notion of spending my twilight years surrounded by my family, witnessing my grandchildren's growth, offering support to my daughter. And then, an idea blossomed. I possessed the means to make a significant difference. I could purchase a grand house, ample enough for Beatrice's family and me. They would save on their rent, and I wouldn't feel so isolated. That very day, I telephoned Beatrice and proposed we meet. We settled into a quaint cafe near her workplace, and I unveiled my plan. "Mother, are you serious?" Beatrice's eyes widened in surprise, yet I detected another flicker, an undeniable spark of interest, a calculated assessment. I dismissed it at the time. Absolutely, dearest. I've already explored a few options. There's a magnificent house in Old Evergreen City, 4 spacious bedrooms, a sprawling living room, 2 full bathrooms, a 2-car garage, and a generous lot. You could finally cultivate the garden you've always dreamed of. But that would be incredibly expensive, wouldn't it? She fidgeted nervously with her napkin. I can certainly afford it, I declared, a touch of pride in my voice. I'll sell our townhouse and I'll supplement that with a portion of my savings. I also have those 2 rental properties. I can liquidate one. That should be more than sufficient. What about Owen? Have you spoken to him? No, I wanted to discuss it with you first. If you're amenable, we can inform him together. Beatrice hesitated, her mind visibly whirring, weighing the pros and cons. You know, that's an incredibly generous offer, she finally said. Let me speak with Owen, and then we can delve into the specifics together. 2 days later, they arrived at my townhouse. Owen was uncharacteristically animated and affable. He extended a firm handshake, clapped me on the shoulder, and addressed me as mother-in-law, a familiarity he had never previously used. This is a truly brilliant idea, Eleanor, he declared, surveying my living room. We are genuinely touched by your thoughtfulness. We discussed the intricacies, the neighborhood, the estimated cost, the potential moving date. I suggested we co-own the house equally, but Owen shook his head. Why complicate things with joint ownership? It's simpler if one of us handles the title to avoid tax complexities and other bureaucratic hurdles. Well then, it falls to me, I stated. I'm purchasing it after all. Beatrice and Owen exchanged a glance. Mother, but Beatrice faltered. I apologize for bringing this up, but at your age, if anything were to happen, there would be considerable red tape, potential legal complications. It's better if the title goes directly to us, Owen interjected smoothly. It will be less burdensome for everyone involved. We're family, aren't we? I wavered. There was an unsettling insistence in their demeanor, yet, on the other hand, they had a point. At my age, it was prudent to consider such eventualities. So, I conceded. The house hunt spanned nearly 2 months. Beatrice, Owen, and I viewed probably 24 properties before discovering one that resonated with everyone. A grand Victorian estate in Old Evergreen City, recently renovated, yet retaining its historical allure. I fell instantly in love with it. Soaring ceilings, gleaming hardwood floors, expansive windows that offered glimpses of the distant cityscape. It exceeded my initial budget, necessitating the sale of both my rental apartments, but it felt entirely worthwhile. The transaction proceeded seamlessly. I paid the full asking price, and the house was formally deeded to Beatrice and Owen. I vividly recall standing on the front lawn the day we received the keys, overwhelmed with an immense sense of joy. I would finally have a true family unit once more. The move, as all moves are, was a flurry of activity. The movers, the endless boxes, the furniture, the minor disagreements about placement. I was assigned a room on the first floor, spacious, bathed in natural light, with its own private bathroom. Owen referred to it as Grandma's Annex, claiming it would be more comfortable for me to avoid climbing stairs. Thoughtful, perhaps, but I now realized their intent from the outset was to segregate me from their portion of the house. The initial days were filled with jubilant excitement. We shared meals, discussed plans for settling in. Even the grandchildren seemed to soften, occasionally engaging me in conversation. I assisted with minor repairs. Beatrice prepared my favorite dishes. Owen solicited my opinion on the garden layout. It was idyllic. However, after approximately a week, I noticed a subtle shift. First, I was no longer invited to family dinners. Beatrice would bring my meals to my room, explaining that the children required uninterrupted time at the table for their studies. Then Owen became agitated when I ventured into the garden while the children were playing, asserting I was disrupting their activities. And when I offered to mend a dripping faucet in the kitchen, he curtly informed me he could handle it himself and that I shouldn't meddle in their affairs. I attributed these incidents to the exhaustion of the move, the stress of the transition. I tried to be helpful, yet unobtrusive. I tried to ignore the sharp words and cold glances, but with each passing day, it became undeniably clear that my presence in the house I had purchased for them was unwelcome. One evening, I overheard Beatrice and Owen talking. They were unaware that I had returned from my stroll and was standing in the hallway. "She's always here," Owen grumbled irritably, "watching, critiquing, pointing things out. I feel like I'm under a microscope. What do you suggest?" Beatrice's voice sounded weary. "It's her house, too." "No, it's our house. That's what the documents she signed clearly state." At those words, a chilling sensation crept down my spine, and I silently straightened up. Something told me this was merely the prelude to greater tribulations. 2 weeks after I moved in, Beatrice announced her intention to host an official housewarming party, inviting friends, co-workers, and neighbors so everyone could admire our new home. I embraced the idea with enthusiasm. After all, I had every reason to be proud. The house, particularly after we acquired new furniture and new window treatments, truly exuded an air of luxury. "Mother, would you mind if we scheduled it for next Saturday?" Beatrice inquired at breakfast. "Owen has the day off, and the children don't have any commitments." "Of course, darling. Is there anything I can do to assist?" "No need," Owen quickly interjected. "We'll handle everything. All you have to do is look presentable and smile for the guests." His tone felt condescending, but I held my tongue. I had been diligently striving in recent days to avoid reacting to such trivialities, to refrain from exacerbating the already strained atmosphere. Preparations for the housewarming party were in full swing. Beatrice ordered food from a catering service. Owen meticulously compiled the guest list and procured alcoholic beverages. Even the grandchildren were enlisted. Willow helped with decorating, and Leo was in charge of the music. I, on the other hand, was carefully excluded from the process. "It's for your own good, Mother," Beatrice stated when I offered my assistance. "You need to conserve your energy." I felt utterly unwanted in my own home, but I consoled myself with the hope that things would improve after the party. On the day of the celebration, I awoke early, brimming with anticipation. I donned my finest suit, the deep sapphire one Arthur had gifted me for my 70th birthday. I carefully styled my hair, even applying a dash of the exquisite French cologne I reserved for special occasions. By the time I emerged from my room, the house buzzed with activity. Caterers meticulously arranged tables and laid out hors d'oeuvres. Owen issued directives, and Beatrice bustled about with flowers and candles. I attempted to offer my help, but Owen simply waved me away. "Eleanor, you'll only get in the way. You'd better return to your room, and we'll call you when everything is ready." Frustrated, I retreated to my room and spent a few hours there, leafing through an old photo album, recalling the days when my little Beatrice had gazed at me with adoration instead of barely concealed irritation. The guests began to arrive around 6 o'clock in the evening. I joined Beatrice and Owen to greet them, shaking hands and smiling, yet feeling like an insignificant extra at someone else's gathering. Not a single invitee was a friend or acquaintance of mine. They were all Beatrice and Owen's co-workers, their friends, the parents of Leo and Willow's classmates. One of the guests, a gentleman roughly my age, expressed an interest in the history of the house, inquiring how long it had been in our family. "Oh, it's a new acquisition," I replied proudly. "I purchased it recently so we could all live together." "You bought it?" the man interjected, casting a curious glance at Owen, who stood beside me, visibly tensing. "Well, technically, it's my wife's in my house," Owen interjected swiftly, placing his hand on my shoulder and squeezing it a little harder than necessary. "My mother-in-law generously assisted with the down payment, and we are profoundly grateful to her. Aren't we, Eleanor?" I was mortified by the blatant fabrication, but I didn't wish to create a scene in front of the guests, so I merely nodded. Owen immediately pulled me aside and hissed, "Don't you dare tell everyone you bought this house. People will start asking questions, and it will embarrass us." "But it's the truth," I protested. "What embarrassment? I'm proud to be able to provide my family with a house like this." "That's precisely what I'm saying." Owen shook his head vehemently. "You're humiliating me in front of my friends, implying that I'm incapable of providing a house for my own family." "I didn't intend to. Just keep your mouth shut." He cut me off and strode away, leaving me alone with a bitter knot in my throat. The evening progressed. Everyone was enjoying themselves, drinking, eating, dancing. I felt increasingly isolated and unwanted. At some point, the incessant noise and forced smiles became overwhelming, and I decided to retreat to my room for a while. Sitting on my bed, I reflected that perhaps the idea of cohabitation wasn't as sound as I had imagined. Perhaps we all needed more personal space. Maybe we should sell this house and acquire 2 smaller ones, one for me and one for them. A knock sounded at the door, and without awaiting a response, Beatrice and Owen entered. Their expressions clearly indicated that this would not be a pleasant conversation. "Mother, we need to talk," Beatrice began, perching on the edge of the bed. Owen remained standing, arms crossed over his chest. "Of course, darling. Is something amiss?" "We've been contemplating this for some time, and we've decided it's best for you to live separately," she blurted out, avoiding my gaze. "What?" I couldn't believe my ears. "But we just moved in. I bought this house so we could live together." "The thing is, Eleanor," Owen interjected, "your presence is creating certain difficulties for our family." "What kind of difficulties?" I felt the blood rush to my face. "I try not to disturb anyone. I spend most of my time in my room." "It's not just that." Beatrice tugged at the sleeve of her blouse, still not meeting my eyes. "The children complain that they don't feel comfortable bringing friends over when you're always watching them, and Owen and I can't relax knowing that you could emerge at any moment. And you know, no, I don't." My anger flared. "This is my house. I paid my money for it." "Technically," Owen emphasized the word, "it's Beatrice's and mine. That's what's written on the deed you signed." "But that was a formality. We had an agreement." "We're grateful for your gift," Owen interrupted me, his voice hardening. "But this is our house now, and we decide who lives in it." I looked at my daughter, expecting her to intercede, to utter a word in my defense, but Beatrice only lowered her eyes guiltily and said quietly, "I'm sorry, Mother. We think you'd be better off in a retirement community. They'll take better care of you there than we can." A retirement community? I couldn't fathom it. "You're sending me to a retirement community from the house I bought?" "Don't be so dramatic, Eleanor," Owen said with a dismissive wave. "It's not that bad there, and it's not forever. Perhaps in time—" "Out!" I sprang from the bed, my hands trembling with a mixture of rage and wounded pride. "Get out of my room now!" They exchanged glances, and something akin to apprehension flickered in their eyes. But then, Owen straightened up and said resolutely, "You don't understand the situation, Eleanor. This is no longer your room. This is our home, and we're asking you to leave it tonight." "Tonight?" I was stunned. "But we have guests." "Precisely why," Owen nodded. "Everyone's occupied, so no one will notice your departure, and there won't be any awkward questions." "You can't do this." I felt my throat constrict and tears sting my eyes. "Beatrice, say something. I'm your mother." My daughter stood up and walked to the door where Owen was standing. "Mother, please don't create a scene. We've already made up our minds. Compose yourself and leave gracefully." "Gracefully?" I laughed bitterly. "In your twisted perception, gracefully means ejecting your 74-year-old mother onto the street during a party at the house she bought." "You said you bought it for us." Beatrice shrugged, not a trace of remorse in her voice. "Well, thank you for the house. We adore it. But we don't need you anymore." The words struck me like a physical blow. I gazed at my daughter, the woman I had raised with boundless love, the woman for whom I would have sacrificed everything, and I didn't recognize her. Before me stood a stranger, a cold, calculating individual with my Beatrice's face. "I'll give you an hour," Owen said, glancing at his watch. "Then I'll return to check on your packing. And don't you dare get hysterical in front of the guests. It will only worsen your predicament." They exited, leaving me alone in a room that had been mine that very morning, now suddenly belonging to someone else. I sat there, stunned by the betrayal, unable to comprehend what was unfolding. Was it truly my daughter who had just informed me she no longer needed me? Were they genuinely expelling me from my own home? I attempted to collect my scattered thoughts. Perhaps this was some colossal misunderstanding. Perhaps they had simply consumed too much alcohol at the party. But deep down, I knew it was serious. They had been meticulously planning this for a long time, perhaps even before I had offered to purchase the house. They were merely awaiting the opportune moment. Mechanically, I began to pack items into the suitcase I hadn't yet had time to fully unpack since moving in. Clothes, toiletries, medications, cherished photo albums. What else? I surveyed the room, attempting to decide what to take and what to abandon. The crushing realization that I had to condense my entire life into a single suitcase was almost unbearable. When I was nearly finished packing, the door opened without a knock. Leo and Willow, my grandchildren, stood on the threshold. Their smirks confirmed they were fully aware of the situation. "Grandma's packing?" Willow giggled, defiantly chewing gum. "Just don't forget your pills and adult diapers." "And don't even think about taking anything from the house," Leo added, crossing his arms over his chest, a perfect imitation of his father. "Mom said you could only take your personal belongings." I looked at them, and again, I didn't recognize them. When had these children I loved so dearly transformed into such callous, cruel individuals? Who had taught them to treat an elderly person with such contempt? "Does your mother know you're here?" I asked, striving to maintain my dignity. "Why, are you going to complain?" Leo grinned. "She's busy with guests. We just thought we'd check to see if you were sneaking out anything extra." "Get out now!" My voice trembled with indignation and fury. "I'm not so helpless as to tolerate such disrespect from my own grandchildren." "Wow, Grandma's mad." Willow feigned a frightened expression, then burst into laughter. "All right, we're going. Just hurry it up. Dad said he called you a cab. It'll be here in 15 minutes. They departed, leaving the door ajar, and I could hear their laughter echoing in the hallway. Owen kept his word. He appeared at the door precisely an hour later. "Are you ready?" he inquired in a businesslike tone, as if I were embarking on a pleasant vacation, not being forcibly removed from my own home. "And if I'm not?" I attempted to discern a glimmer of empathy in his eyes, but all I found was cold calculation. "Then I'll have to request some of the guests to assist you, to expedite the process." He smiled, but the smile never reached his eyes. "I'm sure you don't wish for a public humiliation." I zipped up my suitcase in silence. It was preferable to leave with a semblance of dignity than to be ignominiously ejected in front of strangers. "The cab's waiting." Owen glanced at his watch. "I'll walk you to the door." And Beatrice? I still clung to a desperate hope that my daughter would come to her senses, that this was all some cruel, elaborate misunderstanding. "She's busy with her guests," Owen said, "and she shouldn't be disturbed. She's upset enough about this situation. I wanted to say more, to plead, to demand an explanation, but I realized it was utterly futile. I grabbed my suitcase and followed Owen. As I passed the living room where the guests reveled, I saw Beatrice. She was laughing at someone's joke, a glass of champagne clutched in her hand. Our eyes met, and for a fleeting moment, her smile faltered. But then she averted her gaze and resumed her conversation as if she hadn't noticed my presence. That was the breaking point. Something inside me shattered completely. My daughter, my flesh and blood, had not only cast me out of the house, she hadn't even found the strength to bid me farewell. Owen opened the front door, and I stepped out into the crisp evening air. A cab indeed waited at the curb. "Where can I take you?" the driver asked as I settled into the back seat. The stark realization hit me. I didn't know the answer to that question. I no longer had a home. "Any hotel nearby?" I mumbled, feeling the traitorous tears welling in my eyes. The cab pulled away, and I glanced back at the house I had believed was mine that morning. Through the grand windows, I could discern the party in full swing. People were dancing, laughing, raising their glasses. Not a single one had even registered that the rightful owner of the house, the one who had financed all this splendor, had just been summarily banished like an unwanted object. In that moment, I vowed to myself that I would never again permit them to exploit me. Never again would I extend a helping hand to those who had so mercilessly discarded me, not even if they pleaded, not even if their lives depended on it. The Harbor Haven Hotel didn't live up to its name. My window overlooked not the tranquil harbor, but the unyielding brick wall of the adjacent building. A cramped room with a well-worn bed, a dim lamp, and a ceaselessly noisy air conditioner became my temporary sanctuary. For the first 3 days of my exile, I barely ventured out. I subsisted on chips and chocolate from the vending machine in the hallway and ignored the infrequent rings of my phone. It wasn't until the 4th day that I compelled myself to emerge and begin the daunting search for more permanent accommodation. Evergreen City, which had always felt like home, now seemed alien and hostile. I wandered the streets, scrutinizing apartment advertisements, feeling like a refugee in my own city. By evening, I managed to secure a small apartment in an aging building on the outskirts. 1 room, a minuscule kitchen, and a bathroom with a persistent dripping faucet. The landlord, upon recognizing my retired status, immediately demanded 3 months' rent in advance. I paid, though it was a significant drain on my dwindling savings. I spent the first night in my new dwelling, perched on the windowsill, gazing at the deserted street. Sleep eluded me. My mind reeled with fragments of phrases Beatrice and Owen had uttered. "We don't need you anymore. Thank you for the house. Thank you for the house. You'll be better off in a retirement community." How could she? How did my little girl, the one I had carried in my arms, the one to whom I had read bedtime stories, the one for whom I would have sacrificed everything, transform into this callous, calculating being? When did it happen? And most crucially, why did I not perceive it? I spent the subsequent days attempting to establish some semblance of a normal routine. I purchased dishes, linens, a few well-loved books from a second-hand bookstore. I retrieved the belongings that hadn't fit into my suitcase that fateful night from the storage facility. I located the nearest supermarket and pharmacy. Life, incrementally, began to resume its course, but there was not a shred of joy in it. Beatrice didn't call. To be honest, I didn't expect her to. Pride would not permit me to initiate contact, although at times, particularly in the quiet of the night, I desperately longed to hear her voice, to confirm that this was all some horrific error. But deep within, I knew it wasn't a mistake. It was their true colors, which they no longer felt compelled to conceal. One morning, a week or 2 after settling in, I went to the park. It was early autumn. The leaves were just beginning to surrender, their verdant hues for the golden embrace of fall, and the sun still offered the gentle warmth of summer. I sat on a bench, observing children at play in the playground, when I suddenly heard a familiar voice. "Eleanor! Eleanor Vance! I don't believe it!" I turned and saw Marcus Thorne, my old friend and former colleague, whom I hadn't seen in 3 years, not since Arthur's funeral. Marcus had changed little, the same stocky build, graying stubble on his chin, and lively eyes beneath bushy eyebrows. "Marcus?" A warmth spread through my chest. "What are you doing here?" "I live nearby, walking off my arthritis," he grinned, settling onto the bench beside me. "And how are you? I haven't seen you in ages." I wanted to offer a neutral response, the usual "I'm fine" or "taking it easy." But instead, I felt my throat tighten and tears well up in my eyes. To my utter horror, I burst into tears right there on the park bench, like a small child. Marcus asked no questions. He simply sat there, his hand resting gently on my shoulder, as I choked out words and tears, recounting the entire agonizing saga, from the initial idea of purchasing the house to the humiliating expulsion on housewarming day. "Those bastards," was all he uttered when I finished. "I'm sorry, Eleanor. I know she's your daughter, but this is beyond the pale. It's my own fault." I shook my head, despairing. "I believed they wanted me, not my money. I gave them everything." "It wasn't your fault that you loved your daughter and wanted to help her," Marcus countered firmly. "It's their fault for taking advantage." We remained in the park until evening. Marcus shared that he had retired 2 years prior, widowed around the same time as I, and now spent his days with a group of fellow retirees at the local bridge club. "Why are you moping around all alone?" he asked me. "Come to our club. We'll sit, play cards, and chat. It's certainly better than staring at the walls at home." I initially wanted to decline. I felt I had no time for recreation, but something in his genuine concern touched me, and I agreed. The bridge club turned out to be a modest room within the local senior leisure center. 5 tables, well-worn decks of cards, a constantly bubbling kettle, and a camaraderie of older gentlemen and women like myself. They accepted me without reservation, as if I had always been a part of their company. Gradually, day by day, I began to emerge from my shell. I started to notice again the warmth of the sun, the beauty of the turning leaves, the undeniable fact that life continued, despite everything. Marcus became a frequent visitor at my small apartment, and I, in turn, visited him. We reminisced about our youth, debated current events, and occasionally ventured to the local pub for a pint. Slowly, I confided in him all the intricate details of my story, including the financial aspects. "Wait a minute." Marcus frowned one day when I mentioned the name of the company through which I had purchased the house, Apex Properties. "I read something about them in the newspaper the other day. Something unsavory." He promised to investigate further and arrived at my apartment the following day, a newspaper clutched in his hand. "Here, look." He unfolded the paper and jabbed his finger at a small article. "Apex Properties under investigation for fraudulent real estate schemes." I read the article, and a chill settled deep within me. The company through which I had purchased the house was accused of a series of scams. They had allegedly sold properties to which they did not possess full legal rights, forged documents, and concealed critical information about legal encumbrances on the properties. "Do you think I'm also—" I couldn't bring myself to utter the word scammed. That would be too much. Cheated by my daughter. Cheated by realtors. It was an unbearable burden for one elderly woman. "We should absolutely look into it," Marcus stated firmly. "I have a nephew who's a lawyer. He's a good man, very knowledgeable. Why don't I speak to him?" The following day, we met Daniel Hayes, Marcus's nephew. A young man in his 30s, impeccably dressed in a sharp suit, with an attentive gaze. He listened intently to my story, posed a few clarifying questions, and requested to review all the documents related to the house purchase. I will need to conduct inquiries, verify the title registration, and research the property's history, he stated, meticulously examining the papers. It will require some time, but Miss Vance, from what I'm seeing so far, you could be in serious trouble. This company appears to have utilized a typical scheme, selling real estate that was either pledged to banks or subject to undisclosed encumbrances. What does that mean for me? I asked, feeling my insides clench with the dread of more impending misfortune. If it is confirmed that the sale was illegal, the purchase contract may be declared null and void. In such a case, you would have the right to demand a full refund from the seller. However, there's a problem. The company has already declared bankruptcy, and many victims are unlikely to receive full compensation. And the house? What will happen to the house if it turns out that the current owners did not consent to the sale, or that there is an undisclosed encumbrance on the property that was not disclosed during the transaction? The house could be seized in favor of the rightful owners or creditors. I sat, stunned by this information. So, not only was I potentially losing money, but Beatrice and Owen could lose the house. Strangely, the thought didn't bring the expected satisfaction, only a profound sense of bitterness and weariness. I will take on your case, Daniel said, gathering the papers. But I must warn you, the process may be lengthy and not necessarily conclude in your favor. I spent the ensuing days in anxious anticipation. Daniel called several times, providing updates on the investigation's progress, but there were no concrete results. I attempted to distract myself by attending the bridge club, taking walks with Marcus, and even enrolling in a basic computer course at the local library. But my thoughts persistently reverted to the house and my daughter's betrayal. And then, precisely 7 days after my meeting with Daniel, something occurred that I was both expecting and dreading. My phone rang, and Beatrice's name illuminated the screen. I stared at the display for a long moment, hesitant to answer. A part of me yearned to hurl the phone against the wall, but another part, the part that still remembered the little girl with pigtails who had called me the best mother in the world, compelled me to press the answer button. "Mother," Beatrice's voice sounded frightened and broken, as if she had been crying. "Mother, are you there?" "Yes," I answered dryly, striving to prevent my voice from betraying the storm of emotions raging within me. "Mother, we're in trouble," she sobbed. "We're being evicted from the house. Some people came with documents. They say the house was sold illegally, that the real owners demand we vacate the premises. Mother, we don't know what to do." I remained silent, attempting to process what I had heard. So Daniel was correct. The house had indeed been sold illegally. "Mother, are you listening?" Beatrice's voice held a note of irritation. "We've been given 3 days to evacuate. 3 days! Where are we going to go with the children?" "What does Owen say?" I asked, surprised by my own calm demeanor. He's in a panic. He says it's some kind of mistake, that he's going to sue, but we don't have money for a good lawyer. Mother, you have to help us." "Have to?" That phrase hit me like a fresh slap. After everything they had done, she believed I owed them something. "What exactly can I do to help, Beatrice?" I asked, my voice sounding alien to my own ears. "Money, of course." There was a demanding edge to her tone. "We need to rent a place, hire a lawyer, and also, maybe you could talk to these people. You know about real estate. You have connections." I listened to her, and I couldn't believe my ears. Not a single word of apology, not a hint of remorse, just demands and the expectation that I would, as always, come to their rescue. "Beatrice," I said slowly, feeling a wave of anger rising inside me. "Do you recall what you said to me on housewarming day?" "What?" She sounded confused. "What do you mean?" "You said, 'Thanks for the house, but we don't need you anymore.' Remember? Mother, this is no time for old grudges. She sounded hysterical. We're in the midst of a disaster. You're having a disaster? I felt something breaking inside of me. And when you kicked me out of the house I bought with my own money, wasn't that a disaster? When I slept in a cheap hotel, not knowing where to go, wasn't that a disaster? Mother, please, no, Beatrice. Now you listen to me, I said quietly but firmly. I bought you the house because I loved you. I wanted to be near my family. And you just used me. You took what you wanted, and then you discarded me as if I were nothing. We were wrong, she said hastily. We're sorry. We really are. But we need your help now. We're a family, Mother. Family? I grinned bitterly. No, Beatrice. A family doesn't do what you did. A family doesn't kick their mother out of the house on housewarming day. A family doesn't say, "We don't need you anymore." What are you saying? Her voice trembled. What I'm saying, I said slowly and clearly, is that you taught me a valuable lesson, and I've learned it. You taught me that family is an empty word when convenience and greed are involved. I have nothing left to give you, Beatrice. You made your choice. I hung up the phone before she could respond, my hand shaking as I placed it back on the receiver. The silence in my small apartment was deafening, yet it felt like a triumph. A bitter, painful triumph. The aftermath and unexpected allies the following days were a whirlwind. Daniel called me, his voice grave, to confirm that Apex Properties was indeed under a major investigation for widespread fraud. He explained that the house Beatrice and Owen occupied was among dozens of properties whose sales were being challenged due to illegal encumbrances and forged documentation. The true owners, in this case, a distant branch of the original family, were now reasserting their claim, backed by irrefutable evidence that Apex Properties had no legal right to sell the property in the first place. The good news, Miss Vance, Daniel had said, is that you are technically a victim of fraud. We can pursue a claim against the remnants of Apex Properties, though as I mentioned, their bankruptcy makes full recovery unlikely. The more immediate concern is your daughter and her husband. They will be evicted. I relayed my conversation with Beatrice to Daniel, omitting my cutting final words. He listened patiently, then offered, "While I can't force them to acknowledge their wrongdoing, if they cooperate with the authorities and provide statements about their transaction with Apex Properties, it might help their case in the long run, and it's a long shot, but it's something." I simply thanked him and hung up. I felt no urge to contact Beatrice, no desire to gloat or offer assistance. My heart, once so full of unconditional love for my daughter, felt like a hollowed-out shell. The news spread through the bridge club quickly. Marcus, bless his kind heart, made sure of it. He presented my story not as one of my foolishness, but as a cautionary tale of a daughter's betrayal and a predatory real estate scheme. The other members, mostly retirees who had seen their fair share of life's hardships, rallied around me. They brought me home-cooked meals, invited me on their outings, and offered endless cups of tea and sympathetic ears. I found a new kind of family in that humble room, a family built not on blood, but on shared understanding and genuine empathy. A glimmer of justice. Months turned into a year. The legal proceedings against Apex Properties lumbered on. Daniel, true to his word, worked tirelessly. He kept me informed, but the process was slow, mired in complex financial investigations and countless other victims. I learned that Beatrice and Owen had indeed been evicted from the house in Old Evergreen City. They had moved into a small, rented apartment, and Owen's landscaping business had reportedly taken a hit due to his preoccupation with their legal woes. Leo and Willow had to switch schools, and their once seemingly charmed lives were now fraught with uncertainty. I heard snippets of information from mutual acquaintances, a distant cousin, an old neighbor, who would occasionally run into Beatrice. They painted a picture of a woman stripped of her former confidence, burdened by stress and financial strain. There were no direct messages, no attempts at reconciliation from her end, and I maintained my silent resolve. Then one crisp autumn afternoon, almost 2 years after that fateful housewarming party, Daniel called. His voice was unusually bright. "Ms. Vance, I have some significant news. The main principals of Apex Properties have been indicted on multiple counts of fraud and racketeering. More importantly, as part of a plea deal, they've agreed to liquidate significant assets to compensate victims. It's not a full recovery, but it's substantial. And because you were the original purchaser, and the funds were directly traceable from your accounts, you're at the top of the priority list for restitution." My heart pounded. "What does that mean for me, Daniel?" "It means," he paused, and I could almost hear his smile, "you're getting a significant portion of your money back. Enough, in fact, to buy yourself a very comfortable home, outright, with plenty left over." Tears, for the first time in a long time, streamed down my face, but these were tears of relief, of a quiet vindication. With the recovered funds, I didn't return to old Evergreen City. Instead, I sought out a vibrant, senior-friendly community on the coast, a place called Seaside Haven. I purchased a charming bungalow with a small garden where I could finally cultivate the roses and herbs I'd always dreamed of. My days were now filled with bridge games, walks along the beach with Marcus, who sometimes drove down to visit, and volunteering at the local animal shelter. I even started taking art classes, discovering a talent for watercolor painting I never knew I possessed. One day, almost 3 years after I had packed my single suitcase, my phone rang. It was an unfamiliar number. I answered cautiously. "Mother?" The voice was hesitant, fragile, barely recognizable as Beatrice's. It's Beatrice." My breath caught. I didn't speak. "Mother," she continued, her voice breaking. I just heard about the Apex Properties case, and about you. I heard you got your money back." Still, I said nothing. "Mother, I'm so sorry," she finally managed, a choked sob escaping her. "I was so wrong. Owen and we were so stupid, so greedy. We lost everything. We lost the house, our savings, the kids. They're so unhappy. And we lost you. Please, Mother, can you ever forgive me?" I listened to her words, a torrent of remorse finally pouring out. The years of pain, the betrayal, the crushing disappointment. It all resurfaced. But mixed with it, strangely, was a faint glimmer of something else. Pity. Not for her loss of material possessions, but for the profound loss of her own integrity, for the family bond she had so carelessly severed. "Beatrice," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. "You and Owen made your choices. You chose material gain over family, convenience over compassion. You taught me a very hard lesson about trust and true worth." There was a long silence on the other end, punctuated by her quiet weeping. "I have found peace, Beatrice," I continued, looking out at the glittering ocean from my new window. "I have found a new home and a new family, and I am content." I didn't offer to help, didn't suggest a reunion, didn't even hint at forgiveness. The words hung in the air, a finality that spoke volumes. "Mother, please," she whispered, her voice desperate. "Goodbye, Beatrice," I said, and gently I ended the call. I stood there for a long moment, the phone still in my hand. The weight of the past lifted, leaving behind a profound sense of liberation. My heart, once a hollow shell, was slowly, steadily, filling with something new. Not bitterness, not resentment, but a quiet, powerful sense of self-worth and the profound joy of a life reclaimed. I had faced the darkness, and I had emerged, not unscathed, but whole. My true story was one of resilience, a testament to the fact that even in old age, the human spirit can find renewal, even when abandoned by those it loved most.